Good afternoon and welcome to the Community Development Standing Committee of Tuesday, May 1st. I am welcoming everybody to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation, and I'm looking for adoption of our amended agenda. Moved by Ted, seconded by Patty. All in favor? Motion carries.
Adding
The
the
amendment-
SLRD.
Yeah, the amendment is adding the SLRD referral, which will be item 4 in our business. Looking at the minutes, we have the, I'm looking for an approval of the minutes, Community Development Standing Committee minutes of April 3rd, 2018. I'm looking to be approved, moved by Patty, seconded by Doug. All in favor? Motion carries. The business arising from those minutes. Seeing none. Moving on. Now I know we have a delegation item 4. I'm not here yet, I don't believe. So we will move into business first, and I will go to item 2, which is our development update from Mr. Jonas Vilanishkas. Take it away, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
And
My
thanks for being
name is
available.
Jonas Vilanishkas, Director of Community Planning. So Council has the development projects list. As per discussion at the last meeting, we've highlighted the priority projects. Those are highlighted in blue. The green projects at the top are all the new projects, and we've also included a rental unit count for active projects. So this is not all of the rental projects on the books, it's just the development applications in stream. I don't have any specific project that highlighted in this round, but I'll take questions from council.
You want a question? We'll just take a minute to digest
Yeah.
this. I have a quick one for you. I noticed recently there was a sale of a property on Government Road right beside the Petrocan, between Petrocan and Emerald Place. There's a large lot in there that was used for parking, so I noticed it sold. Do we have anything coming up on it at all?
No active application. We've had some pre-application meetings about that property. Flood hazard is one issue there. Yes, but we don't have an actual application yet.
No intent on what they might be bringing to the table there?
I think the couple of meetings we had were multifamily with a mixed-use component. The challenge again for a mixed-use component is that flood construction level, which is quite high for commercial space, so it would have to be sort of elevated.
Good, thank you. I'd be nice to see something in there. Doug?
Is that property presently zoned commercial?
I can pull it up just a sec.
Nice to see something in there.
I think it is. Kitty corner from the coffee shop.
Oh, yeah, I think it's commercial, absolutely, it's C4, I think. It's like the postal company or
It's zone C3, so this is the property, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so zone C3.
Who's it? Dowager?
No, it was across the street,
It's a tourist commercial zone.
directly across from the coffee shop. No, that's good. I was just curious about that. Thank you. So that would involve a rezoning.
Oh, yeah.
Patty?
I'm wondering, I've heard that the owners of the property in the mud zone that we made DP to a couple of weeks ago is not pursuing the development and selling the property. Is this, have you heard this, or are they continuing with their file?
No, we're continuing to work with them on getting the development permit issued. The development permit has been issued, it has been approved, but there's usually conditions attached to the approval before it gets issued. So we're working through that. We've heard that as well, and we've actually gone to the owners and asked them, and they said that no, absolutely not, that they're pursuing the project.
Okay.
Ted?
Would that be a stipulation in the agreement?
Nope.
They have to build?
No, they don't have to build it. It's just any agreements stay with the land, right? So the development permit is issued on the land, and somebody could take over and build the same
Yeah.
project.
Yeah, but I mean, what about a timeline on building?
In terms of development permits, you have 2 years after the permit is issued to start construction. And if that doesn't happen, then the permit gets canceled and you have to go through the whole process again.
Going to number 1 on the list, Legacy Ridge. Where is Legacy Ridge? Is that the university?
That's up at the university above Aristotle. So council has seen the development permit for the single family component.
Right.
This is the multifamily component that's above it.
And is that zoning? Is that rezoning or is it zoning?
No, it's a development permit. It's in line with the University Heights zoning. So it'll be a development permit.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm looking at number 2018-20, the last one, the green zone. It's a request for a variance to allow for a large duplex, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Is this in the node densification or the spot densification? And would a variance request to make a bigger house be considered a change in density? Or change in use? Or how would
It
we
is in
evaluate
the
that?
densification area, the sensitive densification area in Brackendale. However, I believe it is in line with with our floodplain management strategy and the bylaw. Staff have indicated to the owners that the setback is excessive, and so we've asked for it to be reduced. But the application came in as that, so we'll bring it to council.
Was that lot was a recent subdivision, was it not? Was it one big lot on the corner? A couple of years ago?
It may have
And
been.
they've got a duplex beside it. I guess I'm trying to get my brain around, there's a lot of RM2 zoning in Brackendale,
Mhm.
and I suspect we're gonna get a lot of requests for this type of thing, and I just wanna make sure that whatever regulations and rules we have in there, they're clear, and we don't get into 300 million variant situations.
Exactly, and that what we've indicated to the applicants that it wouldn't be supportable what is being proposed, because it is an excessive variance request.
Thanks.
Can you refresh my memory what's going in on Third here, right behind the Chieftain?
So that's the project that came to council, I believe, last year. It was a development permit for 2 stories of commercial and residential above, and then it went down to 1 story of commercial and residential above.
Thank you, I remember now. Appreciate that. Anyone have any other questions? Deb? Anyone in the audience? Okay. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Let's see, our delegation is
And
still...
then, before you answer this, can I ask one more question?
Sure, please do.
With regard to the waterfront landing property, they have already got a DP on a portion of it. I was looking at the sub-area plan, and there's, I had some people in the committee asking me about it. The green buffer that's sort of along the water's edge at the, I guess, the northeast edge along the Macomb Channel.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you can answer this question, but they're currently, I noticed in here, subdividing to all the different phases, or big lots, it sounds
Yeah.
like. Is that one separate subdivision, that green area? And does that come back as park to, I see Dave nodding his
Yes.
head. And does that come back to park?
It will be a district-owned park.
And is it considered under our RAR DPs, or is it considered tidal, so it's not?
It will be titled, so it will be under the new official community plan, part of a DP area, the same DP area that will cover title and riparian. But there would be a
But
development permit.
similar principles of
Yes.
protection.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Doug?
And now I have another question. It goes to the last page, and it's file 2015-13, which is the Chikai Ranch TUP number 45 amendment. And I know that's on tonight's agenda, so I wasn't going to get too far into the detail of it, but I just wanted to be clear because it's talked about this being an extension of the temporary use permit. And my understanding is that we give them for a certain period of time and then they might be renewed. And then at the end of that, that's it. They can't go further. So is this in fact the renewal?
It's an amendment, because they've asked for reallocation of the way they hold events. So some of it wouldn't be just a renewal, it would be also some of the conditions changing.
But, yeah, I got the condition part. I wasn't going to go into that discussion, but just whether it's an extension, I didn't know you could extend the period. I mean, you can give them for up to 3 years, and then it can be one renewal for up to 3 years.
That's right. So it is a renewal in that sense.
It's a renewal.
Yeah.
So at the end of the 15 months, this is kind of the second term, so it's 15 months instead of the full 3 years. And the end of the 15 months, we have to either rezone or stop.
Yes, I think theoretically you could apply for another temporary use permit if it came with different conditions.
Yeah, I know you have to be sort of a different deal,
But this temporary use permit wouldn't be able to renew one more time. This would be it.
thank you.
The report tonight talks about they actually want to do a zoning application.
They do,
so this is-
yes.
Yeah, we just want to be clear on the timelines.
Yeah.
Okay, we have no further questions. Okay, thanks very much, Jonas.
Thank you.
We'll move on, don't see our delegation here yet, so we will move on, staying in business. If Mr. Buxton would like to present the Klahani Fund Traffic Assessment for Shannon Falls and Highway 99.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Dave Mara has coordinated the consultants to present. So he can do the necessary introductions.
Terrific, thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, I'm Dave Morrell, Director of Projects. I've coordinated the team here to provide a presentation on the Southern Gate traffic impact assessment work that was completed. So I'll allow introductions.
So, good afternoon. My name is Paul Fensky. I'm a principal with the Kissax Town Planning based in Vancouver. Many of you I've had a chance to meet and walk the Klahani site over the last couple of years. We undertook a review of some of our parking and access issues, which we'll have a chance to present. However, first, I'd like to introduce Jane Farquharson of Fund Transportation. Any other introduction you need to do?
That's it.
That's it.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So 4 slides, quick overview, and then I'll allow Jane to get into her study and findings. So Klahani, 4-star or 5-star 4-season proposed resort on the Klahani land, which sit across the highway from Shannon Falls Provincial Park. Really right in the heart of the designated Southern Gateway for tourism into Squamish, highlighted there in the brown. The gold ribbon, of course, is Highway 99, leading into Squamish. And of course, that area is surrounded with not only Shannon Falls Provincial Park and the Squamish Chief Provincial Park, as you can see, set right in the middle of it. It's a Sea to Sky gondola. And then the Klahani land, which currently have been operating the last 25, 30 years as a campground, is the only waterfront piece of that. And they sit adjacent to and beside the Darrell Bay ferry dock, which is also part of our frontage. Klahani is the vision is inspired by Mr. Bahadur Karim of Symphony Resorts, who's held the property for the last number of years. And is now pursuing actively the design, as I said, of this 4-season 5-star luxury resort to really be the waterfront presence in that Southern Gateway. Some of the issues, of course, though, are the amount of traffic that's currently on the corridor, and specifically the amount of traffic that's trying to access and egress from Shannon Falls Provincial Park using the same lit intersection at Darrell Bay that Klahani would use. Of course, with the advent of Sea to Sky Gondola, the traffic movements have increased, and because of the absence of a full turn movement access in and out of Sea to Sky, there are a number of illegal movements that take place, specifically U-turns and illegal lefts and so on. As we've pursued discussions both with the community, with staff, and with Sea to Sky as kind of partners in the Southern Gateway, if you will, for tourism, what's become very apparent is there's a parking and access issue out there. And of course, like so many things around traffic, everyone has a solution. Everyone has an idea of how to solve it. What we noticed, however, is that there was no independent empirical study or inventory of the issue at all. And so to try and be part of, I think, a good neighbor solution for Squamish, Bahadur then hired Bunt transportation engineers who are very well known and experienced in the corridor as well as in the Lower Mainland to start doing some kind of empirical, objective review of that. And so we had a chance to then host a workshop back in January where we had the Ministry of Transportation and Highways as well as Ministry of Parks, Squamish join us in Vancouver, where we were able to present Bunt's findings as well as talk about potential solutions for that. I believe Gary, of course, was there, and it was out of that meeting that I believe the mayor and Gary would like to then have those findings presented to the committee. The last thing I'll mention is when we look at the layout for the resort, the Klahani itself will use the Darrell Bay full lit.
You have to dance while you
Sorry.
So we know what kind of music.
They're so revealing. They're so revealing. I'll just finish up. Most of you, if not all of you, have seen this. This is the vision layout for Klahani. Coming off the highway, we will use the same intersection, the full lit turning movement intersection at Darrell Bay that provides both access down to Darrell Bay as well as into Klahani on the water side, and then into the provincial park on the uphill side. Part of the vision, of course, is not only to create kind of a landmark destination waterfront resort, but also to see Darrell Bay turned into a public park and landing, something that the entire community can enjoy, given its very unique position, being on the water, being on low bank, and with spectacular views down the sound. When we zoom out from the Klahani site and we start looking at the cadastral or ownership lines, we see then the Klahani 35 acres on the waterfront, the purple being the Darrell Bay lands currently under the administration and control of the District of Squamish. And then we also see on the north side, Shannon Falls Provincial Park, fairly small actually, really focused in and around the falls themselves, and then the Squamish Chief, which is the much larger of the two provincial parks, and running right through the middle of it is the access that Sea to Sky has then up to their facilities on the mountainside. So with that, let's turn it over to the more interesting of the two presentations.
How about that?
There you go.
Okay. Here. So, let's put it on. It takes a while. Okay. Oh, we're back. Okay, good, we're here. So thank you for inviting me to your committee meeting, and I'm going to focus my presentation on the data collection piece of the work that we have done to date on behalf of Bahadur. And that data was primarily collected last summer. So the study area that we looked at for this data collection incorporated what we're calling the Southern Gateway, all the way from Darrell Bay Road to the northern access to the Squamish Chief. So all the highlighted blue areas are the parking lots where we did parking data collection, and we also counted all the traffic going in and out of all those intersections along that piece of the corridor, as well as volumes on the highway. So our data collection, we actually collected data over 4 days in the summer, Friday, July 21st and Saturday, July 22nd. And unfortunately, we collected Friday because we wanted to get kind of the afternoon peak northbound traffic coming up the highway. Obviously, Saturday is probably the busiest day on the corridor in the summer. Unfortunately, we caught a very poor weather day on the 22nd, so we repeated our Saturday data collection on the 29th, which was a top peak day. And we also collected Sunday in order to capture sort of the southbound peak from the northern part of the corridor in Whistler. We conducted parking occupancy count, so basically counting how many vehicles are parked in each lot. Not only did we count the number of cars parked, we counted the number of cars waiting in the drive aisles in order to park, because as we will get into it, there were several instances where that was observed for extended periods of time. We collected traffic and pedestrian count data at all these intersections, and we also did questionnaires. So we randomly approached people who were parking in the Darrow Bay lot and also a couple of the Squamish Chief lots and asked them, where are you going to, how many people were in your car, how long you planning to stay, some basic questions like that. So the focus of this presentation is not necessarily on solutions, it's on our key findings. And as Paul alluded to, a really important part of our findings is that there's some significant safety issues associated with the traffic movements in this side of the corridor. And also some perhaps surprising findings about who is parking where. So in terms of the parking supply, how many stalls are actually out there today? These bubbles indicate the estimated number of stalls. Some of these stalls are marked stalls in blue. Some of them are unmarked stalls, or a mix of marked and unmarked, and those are in yellow, so those are, I would call those estimates. And in red, they're not marked at all. So that was a very high level estimate using aerial photography. So the peak parking day was Saturday, July 29th, one of the busiest weekends of the year. And you can see that the red line is the demand line, and the blue lines are the available supply. So what you can see here is that within the Squamish Chief grouping on the left-hand side there, the graph representing that demand line is in the lower left corner of the slide there, that in fact the demand exceeded the supply. So what that means is we observed people waiting in the aisles, in the drive aisles, or in fact parking illegally behind other vehicles or in little spaces that they can find in the parking lot, or in the case at the far left, vehicles extending up the forestry road at the Squamish Chief. In the Sea to Sky lot, you can see basically supply kind of meeting demand and then the demand dropping around 3 o'clock, which is when you start to see the exit pattern from the Sea to Sky gondola operation. For Shannon Falls, you can see that in fact the demand exceeds the supply for pretty much the entire period of time, and that is really reflective of the fact that the lot is basically full with vehicles waiting to find spots, gumming up the entire operation and making it very difficult for buses to circulate around the lot. In the lower right, you can see the results from what we call the Darrow Bay lots, and these are sort of, there's a lot right close to basically right next to the Klahani site, and then there's sort of a string of lots further down the hill, down to the waterfront. And those lots never approached full capacity, but clearly they filled up from kind of west to east as the day went on, and then left the same way. So overall, counting up all these stalls together, all this demand and all these stalls. The overall peak for the entire corridor uses, generators, happened right around midday, noon to 1:30, and the overall peak demand was almost 1,200 vehicles and certainly higher than the available marked supply. So this was one really important finding. When we interviewed the people using the Darrell Bay lots, what we found was about 77% of them are actually going to Shannon Falls Provincial Park. 14% of them are going to Sea to Sky Gondola, and in fact there is a shuttle bus, private shuttle bus service that takes people to and from the Sea to Sky Gondola, and that 14% to and from Sea to Sky Gondola, we were able to confirm that with actual ridership numbers on that shuttle bus. 7% are going to the Squamish-Chief, and some of them are actually going to the Kalani site for the current operations there. So really, on this day, on this very peak day, the vast majority of demand associated with these Darrell Bay lots is related to the Squamish-Chief, Shannon Falls activity. So based on these interview surveys, we made an estimate of the actual demand associated with each one of these generators, the peak demand, on this Sunday, July 23rd. And the Squamish-Chief peaked about noon to 1 p.m., about 340 or so cars park of demand. Sea to Sky with 510, and the Shannon Falls at about 300. So Shannon Falls today only has, I think, about 80 stalls. So this shows you the excess demand, which is basically overflowing into the Darrell Bay lots. And clearly, Shannon Falls relies heavily on those parking stalls. So when we look at the demand versus supply, there is definitely a shortfall for the Squamish-Chief. We're estimating about 30 stalls, maybe more. We didn't count all the way up the Forest Road. The Sea to Sky operation, the current stall deficit is almost 60 stalls. But Shannon Falls, taking this peak day, the current deficit is about 215 stalls. Now, obviously that deficit is not evident every day of the year. The highly variable demand associated with these parks, a lot of it is seasonal and weather dependent, et cetera, but this gives you an idea of the magnitude of kind of the absolute peak overflow demand. So we did look at the growth in annual park visitors. This is information that we received from BC Parks. What's a bit difficult in making any kind of conclusions from this data, they started changing how they changed date count equipment, and they also changed how they counted. So for Shannon Falls, for example, they didn't start counting people generated from buses until 2012-13, when they started including those people, the visitation numbers jumped, as you can see. But you can also see that there has been a growth pattern at Shannon Falls even from 2012-2013. The Squamish-Chief numbers are quite variable. You can see the impact of the construction during the Sea to Sky Highway Improvement Project, the impact of weather in 2011-2012. So it has bounced around in the past. We also got some visitation information from the Sea to Sky Gondola operation. This diagram represents ranked hours, days, I should say, of number of visitors in July and August. So we were given July and August daily visitor counts, and we basically ranked them. So the very top day you can see highlighted in red, August 19th, was almost 4,400 visitors in a day. Day 2, which is actually the day we observed parking demand, was almost the same amount, about 4,350 visitors. kind of day 10 represents what I would call a typical summer weekend. It's the 10th highest day in July and August, and the peaks tend to be on the Saturday or Sundays. So in 2 months, there's 8 days. So day 10 kind of gives you an idea of what would be typical peak demand, and that's still up at almost 3,600 visitors. So as at the beginning of this project, we were advised by Sea to Sky that they were considering increasing their lift capacity, and in fact potentially doubling their lift capacity. So we started to think about, well, we know we have a parking deficit now. What could be the future parking deficit? And this is just an extremely simplistic assessment. If we doubled the lift capacity, maybe we would double the parking demand. I personally don't think it would be double because there's other effects going on here, but for example, perhaps there is a visitor load up at the top of the gondola, the maximum that could be accommodated by the actual terrain, for example. That might be the limiting factor. But let's say there are no other limiting factors. Let's say we double the lift capacity, and let's say there is no constriction on available supply. What would the demand look like? So with this very simplistic model, what we estimated is that there could in fact be a deficit in the order of 810 stalls. Now today, there's no doubt in my mind that the parking supply for Sea to Sky Gondola is limiting its visitation. There could be, as I said, there could be other factors that are limiting visitation. So this analysis really just says, what if there is no limit, capacity limits? We also looked at how many vehicle trips each one of these activity zones was generating. And this just gives you a notion of the proportion between the different generators. Shannon Falls, Sea to Sky Gondola, and Squamish Chief. Interestingly, they kind of are generating each one of them in the same order of magnitude at the peak. So on the Sunday afternoon, where you have the big kind of everybody's leaving primarily to go south, at 4 p.m. you have the peak vehicle generation. So from these 3 generators in total, there's over 900 vehicle trips an hour entering and exiting. The dominant movement, of course, is exiting at that time. So to give you an idea, that 900 vehicles an hour represents about a quarter to a third of the entire traffic on the corridor itself. Just those 900 vehicles an hour. So these are very high generators during the peak summer, peak nice day, beautiful day type of scenario. There's also private transit currently serving this corridor. I won't go into this because I want to get to some of the key traffic and safety issues, which was really the focus here. There's also some cycling routes, and we know we've got some peak hour pedestrian and cyclist volumes. So really what I want to point out here is the volumes at Darrell Bay Road and Shannon Falls signalized intersection. In this orientation, the north leg of the intersection, we counted about 320 pedestrians per hour crossing on that leg of the intersection, which is the only marked crosswalk. To give you an idea of scale, that's in the same order of magnitude as if you went on a sunny Saturday on Lonsdale in North Vancouver, for example, on a shopping street. That's kind of a comparator for you. So very high volumes, lots of them children.
Can I just make
Yeah, just one quick question.
So, and that's not just one direction, that's
Both directions combined, to and from, yeah. So the key traffic safety issues that we saw were related to U-turns at 3 locations. So starting at the northern end at the access, the Forestry Access Road, the primary access to Squamish Chief, and also U-turns at the signalized intersection at Darrell Bay Road. We also saw a lot of jaywalking at Darrell Bay Road, and we also saw pedestrian overcrowding. There's a traffic island in the northwest quadrant of that intersection, which is very small. And in fact, with 320 pedestrians an hour crossing, there's not enough physical space on that traffic island to accommodate the waiting people, and so they overflow into the travelway. So the U-turn volumes were particularly astonishing. So this is Sunday, July 23rd. This is a 5-hour long observation period we captured from 3 to 7 p.m. So definitely captured kind of the peak exiting pattern from Sea to Sky Gondola. And because there are no left turns either into or out of Sea to Sky Gondola, people are achieving these left turns by doing, most of them are doing illegal left turns. So the green movement, representing 39 vehicles observed, is actually a legal U-turn. So people turn right out of Sea to Sky Gondola, they turn into the Squamish Chief, they go around the roundabout and they come back out, and they have a legal movement. The other movements in red are illegal and frankly, some of them extremely unsafe. There's 145 vehicles observed in this 4-hour period turning left up at the Forestry Access Road. They do this by doing a U-turn right on the highway, or they pull into the Forestry Access Road and do a quick left turn across the throat of the intersection. There's a lot of different ways these U-turns are being executed, but this just gives you an idea of the actual magnitude of the volume. I've got some videos that I'd like to share with you.
I love videos.
That, I mean, when we were hired to do this work, our counters did not come equipped with cameras. They were so astonished by the behavior they saw, they pulled out their own iPhones and cameras and took pictures. So this is one of the scariest movements. Let's just see if we can get this rolling. I want to do that.
You need to turn away though.
So this guy's coming in here. Oh, I'll just turn around.
Wait, you're having fun on your own.
Oh, I'm enjoying it all on my own. Okay, so let's just see here.
I think you have to close
Oh,
power.
I have to close my presentation. Okay, so let me
Just miniaturize it.
I'll go to
Oh,
that.
look at that. Oh.
And I'll go to that. Look at, we're missing it all. Okay. Let's close that. Okay, so are we back? Okay, there we go. All right, I will try again. It's a short clip, but it shows two different U-turns that happens right after one another, and both of them are just scary. So white car, oh, want to turn left, oh, backing up on the wrong side of the highway. Oh, and now I'll merge in to traffic going 80 kilometers an hour. Oh, but this is even better. Oh, look, can't quite make it. So we saw this happening constantly when we were out there, and
I've since gotten rid of the little red car.
yeah, the little red car is gone. And I will share with you, we found this so egregious, we've actually written a letter to the Ministry of Transportation indicating this is a safety problem that needs to be addressed. The Squamish, the Shannon Falls U-turn, well, actually maybe I'll tell you, I'll do the Shannon Falls U-turn next. So in some, oh, can't play. That's not acceptable. Let's try that.
That's the other one we just watched.
I think that's the one we just
No,
watched,
that's the one we just watched, sorry.
Yeah, they're all about this big. on
I
the
know, I
laptop
can't
there.
see a thing anymore, okay. So these are people turning south, and, oh, yeah. So, oh, another one. Oh, look at
There's
that.
Ted.
So, arguably this is less unsafe because the northbound traffic is actually being held back by the signal, but it is still illegal, and it's not a movement that somebody coming who's turning right out from Shannon Falls is ever expecting. So it's not a legal maneuver.
Well, and it doesn't count the pedestrians crossing. And I'm just gonna do a U-turn, and I didn't see Jimmy.
Yeah, whoops,
Didn't
yeah.
see him, he's only, 2 feet high, right? which we'll see in this next video.
So this is the, oh, sorry, I keep
Maybe if we
not
just
opening
open
it.
with.
Yeah, open with. So this is the pedestrian crossing volumes, extremely high pedestrian crossing volumes, and you start to see the number of people gathering here cannot be accommodated by the island, and people just drift out into this, basically what is the right turn lane off the highway. And drivers approaching southbound, there's sight obstruction. You cannot see pedestrians that have drifted into that zone until you're quite close. So we see that as a significant safety
I think the
problem.
traffic island too, you know, the 6 or 8 inches of height difference gives you a false sense of security on
yeah.
vehicles that are going, you know, upwards of 100K, certainly 80 to 100K, you know, as those are traveling right now.
And you'll also see, you know, these are kids. We see people drifting away, like they're not even walking in. There's so many pedestrians, they're kind of not be able to be accommodated in the markings. The markings, you can barely see them.
And then they're all coming over to our paid parking lot.
From the paper.
And then the last one is, thank you for reminding me, is this sort of jaywalking behavior. So pedestrians cross over here, but really where they've parked their car is over here. So what you see is they sort of get over and then they drift across the throat of this intersection, as you can see while vehicles are coming in and out here. Oh, run with my child. So we kind of get this, some people use the sidewalk, but a lot of people just sort of wander down here and have all sorts of jaywalking all over the place here. So again, not the safest condition.
Well, I hope the developer doesn't have to put in an overpass.
So I'll go back
It's
to
not
my
rezoning, so no.
presentation here, and I think I was...
Entire lot, including
A little bit more.
Where is it? It's on the west side of the train track. And there's a sea.
So I guess based upon what we saw when we were out there, we developed some sort of key goals for any kind of solution to this corridor. We must eliminate U-turns, particularly in these unsafe condition locations here and here. The Squamish Chief does not have enough parking. There are opportunities in this area to expand the parking supply, but in our workshop with Parks, we were reminded that they're the Ministry of Parks, not of parking. So it's a trade-off in the land that would have been used for something else, and I know that there's campsites in here and potentially plans for expansion of those campsites. Obviously, the Sea to Sky Gondola does not have enough parking today, at least on those peak days, and I would posit they have a lot of peak days, and so there may be numerous peak days where they're having some kind of significant overflow. I think the biggest challenge here is that Shannon Falls clearly does not provide the peak parking demand, and right now Shannon Falls is supported, the visitation to Shannon Falls is clearly supported by the stalls which are used, which are available down in Darrow Bay to a significant extent. And if those stalls were no longer available, you could argue that, well, people just won't visit the park. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but this is clearly a major driver of some of the problems we observed related to parking down in Darrow Bay, but more importantly, the pedestrian crossing safety issues that we saw at the signalized intersection, which resulted in the jaywalking and at this location that we don't feel is safe. So That is the end of my presentation in terms of the data that we collected, and I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have on this material.
Of course, start with Councilor Chappelle.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you separated out local and people that were driving up the highway as opposed to people coming from Squamish at all?
When we counted our traffic volumes, we counted by movement. So we didn't know who was, I couldn't tell if somebody lived in Squamish or who was local or not, but we were able to see who came down and turned left in and turned left out. So we do have all that data by movement at each one of the intersection locations. So.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for gathering all that information. That's, it's good to have for sure. But I'm just curious as to, is there a game plan? I mean, maybe to Gary, what can the district do? It's nice to see this, but we don't have any say on, sorry.
No, through the chair, I mean, we don't control what happens on the highway, but I think what the information's revealed is that rather than the Klahani project having an issue with traffic, there's an issue with traffic and parking and pedestrians with respect to Shannon Falls. So that's an issue that we would take up with the province. It's not something the developer can fix. It's not really a development issue. It's something far bigger and something between us and the province, because we have the parking, they have the park, so to speak.
Oh, sorry, Patty.
Yeah. And I did want to invite Kirby up if he wants to say anything too. Yeah, this was quite interesting. A couple of sort of ideas or solutions were thrown out at the meeting back in January, just as discussion points. But one of the things I heard distinctively from MOE was, we don't want to increase capacity. We're at a threshold already. The experience is being diminished by the amount of visitors to Shannon Falls. They almost sounded like they'd like to find a way to reduce the traffic to Shannon Falls more than just enable more people to come. So I understand that perspective. In the meantime, they are relying on district lands to accommodate their visitorship currently. And then I think the two things that really stuck out for me were the really dangerous U-turns that were happening both at the Squamish Chief, predominantly people coming out of the gondola trying to head back southbound, and at Shannon Falls with all the pedestrian movements and how fast cars go there. Ironically, I was having a site tour with everybody. This was a year or so ago, and we were in the Klahani restaurant. We heard crash bang, and sure enough, someone had run into one of the traffic light posts just as we were there, and had crashed the car. So it'd be interesting to look at the highway stats to see how many actual accidents are happening in those areas too. I know we have that data somewhere, so it'd be interesting to just correlate those. But I think in particular those two traffic safety related issues and the pedestrian issue with all the parking for Shannon Falls happening over on the Darrell Bay area are areas that I think we want to really focus in on and try to figure out some solutions to that. Obviously the province has to be a big part of that conversation. It's their infrastructure that's been built to a certain standard that is not meeting today's expectations. So I think that's the nub of the conversation that we need to have with the province on how to make these areas safer. And I'm glad you've made this, brought this information to the province already. I think that's a starting point. So that, I think I'd like to see council sort of think about how do we start to move this forward with the province, because that's really where the nub of this conversation is.
So,
Thank you, Peter. I really think that better active transportation is needed from our side as well. The not having a left-hand turn into the gondola parking is in, and I don't know how it was allowed to go forward without the Ministry of Transportation putting in a left-hand turn, forcing people to do a U-turn and go into Darrell Bay and turn around there. It's incredibly dangerous, and also no safe pedestrian route. We don't have any active transportation from Squamish to the gondola either, so that means employees. We're going to have a bus route shortly, and I think encouraging, we can't just keep building more parking. We're talking about provincial parking, provincial parks. So you just can't keep expanding parking lots because you'll never meet capacity. You have to, at some point, increase active transportation and bus routes to encourage people to take different routes. And I also think, we had discussed this before, is changing to pay parking in our lots in there so that there's actually monetary, and then having a centralized parking lot closer to town. We had the Adventure Center parking lot. It's not, it won't have enough capacity anymore, but we could have had a shuttle bus that is paid for by, maybe encouraged by the province to pay a little bit in, and other members, the gondola, and I'd like to see how the bus route goes and how much that relieves capacity, but also cycling routes. There's no way to get to those areas safely without going on the highway. So there's better solutions than just building more parking. And in the meantime, collecting the revenue off all those people that are walking, in order so that we actually have some revenue coming in to pay for those changes, would be a good start for me.
Good.
Yeah, thanks. I remember a little while ago we were talking to, I thought all the landowners down there, the gondola, and suggested everybody go away and kind of come back with how we're going to share some of that parking down there. Did you guys ever get involved in anything like that? With the LNG guys and the gondola guys, and I thought there was going to be a discussion by all you.
No, we haven't been part of anything like
Yeah.
that.
That was about the leases.
That was about the leases, and they all had different uses for
Yeah,
the leases. It
okay.
wasn't only parking.
Okay, that's
But
what
I do believe the gondola and Tahani have talked. I think LNG has been doing their own thing, and there was
Yeah.
one other user, I can't remember it, and I don't know if they've been involved, but
Mhm.
part of this is the
Yeah.
discussion that came out of those leases.
Well, from our standpoint, from the district standpoint, I mean, we could put the pressure on everybody down there just by closing our parking lots, and then the parks would know, and then everybody would know. That would bring everyone to the table. But I was mostly just trying to, I know we're going to have pressure from other users that want to use that area as well, soon. So I don't know if us writing letters to the province is going to cut it, because we've been writing letters to the province about Highway 99 and Cleveland Avenue for 7 years, as long as I've been here. And they still haven't done anything, so.
Kirby, did you want a chance to have a
Sure,
word?
just for some context of gentlemen interested in Sky Gauntlet. A few things, and we were privy to the information in the study on a couple of different occasions, which is great. I think it highlights a number of different things. Safety concerns chief amongst them, obviously. Don is here with the Ministry of Transportation, so I'll let him to speak to his perspective on those. From our perspective with the gondola, that's our number one concern in all of this, is that, well, let me step back for a minute. In terms of our business, you saw the chart of visitation up there. We have 10 days currently. Around 3,500 visits a day is where I get the most popular comment I get is, man, your parking lot's always full. Well, it's actually full about 10 days a year, and appears to be full about 20, 25 days per year as soon as that front lot is full. But the days that we get that egress lane chalking up are around 4 or 5 days, and those are the days where if I'd had here, I'd lose them, right? Because you got people sometimes backing out on the highway. And I appreciate completely the complexity of an in and out, north or south from the gondola parking lot. There's no easy solution there. Lights have been proposed, cutting the side bank out into the chief parking lot has been proposed. The one that's most appealing, frankly, is contiguous parking on that I guess you call it the southern side of the highway, where Shannon Falls would have larger parking than it would somehow connect into us, which is somehow connected to the chief. But appreciating logistically from an expense perspective, you're talking about not just cutting down trees in the park, you're just crossing creeks and rivers and cut banks and all those kinds of things. It's just it's an enormous idea. Even though I like it, I mean, from just a pure optimistic perspective, if Shannon Falls could accommodate more parking on site and swap that out with Darrell Bay, so there's a seaside adjunct park perhaps, something like that. That would be, I think, a beautiful thing for everybody, and offer more connectivity to downtown through modes of transportation that would be really fun, ferries, etc. That being said, we don't see we are at some point going to increase the capacity on the lift. We have 20 cabins, we can add 20 more, so that's when we say doubling of capacity. It's not another gondola, it's just taking the existing lift up to the capacity. And we'll likely do that more to facilitate faster downloads than uploads, just to reduce wait times, and that will have some effect on churning the parking lot. Obviously, the rate of people up and get down, presuming their duration of the sun stays the same, the more vehicles will be in and out of the parking lot. In my estimation, currently, that's maybe on a peak day around a 15 to 20% increase in visitation. And so the pace at which we'd add cabins is likely 2 per year for the next 10 years. So we're not talking about doing that in one fell swoop simply because we don't have the need to at this moment in time. And that'll have some relief. But truly our business focus isn't about driving more people into those core periods. It's about building out the attraction so that it fits with our brand, which is access and sightseeing. So that more people come on more days of the year, not more people coming on those single busy days of the year. So shoulder season, spring, fall, winter, like every kind of tourism operator wants to do. So the self-limiting nature right now of those peak days, we call it a theoretical cap of about 4,500 people, is really driven by the parking lot, because we could have more lifts. But the experience at the summit begins to degrade quite rapidly at about that number. So no question, if we can accelerate people downloading, that helps, but it doesn't take away from the fact that at any given time, we may have 2,500 people roaming around the summit. And that just is probably where we want to cap the experience. So it's an odd thing to say from a business perspective, but I have board support around expanding the days of busyness being the more appropriate driver for the business versus trying to get more people up there on working days. And I just want that as a piece of context. The safety issues, I think, are self-evident, and I think those solutions, there's some simple ones and there's also some complicated ones in there. Obviously, we like the idea of having a resort next door. It's a beautiful design. That being said, 2 things happen in Darrell Bay. One is that there is some parking lost, so that's a bit of a concern. But I do want to state, sort of for the record, because we currently lease, or in between, but we tend to lease Darrell Bay. That went from being a real business driver, and the 14% of people that park there are obviously important to the business. But now we do it more of a safety concern. We don't want people, because the route that people take up the highway is not through the parks. They take the path of least resistance, and they walk up the highway. So it's just better for us to scoop them up and shuttle and run them around. So in effect, what we're paying for is signage so people know where the gondola is, and to let them know that there's a bus pickup there and to have a designated stall. The Shannon Falls parking is a concern, and will continue to be a concern until the parks decides that they need to resolve it in something. And the concern there, from my perspective, not necessarily theirs, is the fact that the buses can't get in and out of Shannon Falls. The cars can park at the laneway waiting for that vacant spot, but the buses that are there can't egress, and the buses that are waiting can't get in. And Darrell Bay is an appropriate spot for bus parking, so it just needs to be considered. And the last thing I'll say is, paid parking makes all kinds of sense in all kinds of different places. But in the context of this lack of supply of parking between the chief, us, and we're constrained by the land that we've got, and Shannon Falls, are constrained philosophically. If you put paid parking in one place, you've got to look at the safety implications of where those people would choose to go or attempt to go. And they're going to be doing what they did when BC Parks put the no posts in the chief last year, and then suddenly saw strings of cars parked on the highway. And then you've got tow trucks egressing, towing cars, and all kinds of things that may pose a significant, if not more so, a safety concern. So it just needs to be contemplated in the context of a continuous parking strategy for the corridor.
Thank you, Kirby. Jeff?
Yeah. I just can't see the property at Darrell Bay continuing to support, or to, its highest and best use is not a parking lot for the 10 days everybody's
It's
getting.
seaside land, it's not a parking lot
Yeah.
at all, in my opinion, either. I
Yeah,
agree.
so in that, has the gondola ever contemplated building a parking structure?
Yeah, so I've looked at that as an emotional experience, and we're actually looking at getting more detailed costing on what a one level down, one level up parking structure would be like. I tell you that'll be after I die though, because currently it's the expense runs right in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $35,000 a stall. And the bizarre part of that is whatever number of cars we're actually capable of parking in there, call it 400. As soon as we put structure on there, every piece of structure we add reduces the number of parking stalls we've got. And so suddenly one floor down, one floor up, basically replaces the parking that we currently have in existence. So now we've got to go up 2 floors, potentially three floors to make it actually work in terms of driving the incremental business. Then we're pouring a vast volume of people into the Alpine environment. And yes, we might make more money, but the experience would be so degraded that our brand would be degraded. And at the end of the day, we're just doing that to pay for the investment of parking. So it becomes this navel-gazing circular exercise.
Yeah.
We're way better to just build something at the top that compels people to come on a rainy day.
Yeah, well, buses are great, active transportation, but the gondola requires the parking down at that,
Some of it, yeah.
yeah. So that's part of your parking strategy, and I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
What's gonna happen when that's not, what would you do then? When all of a sudden you can't use that parking anymore, then what?
You know, we're even losing that 14% of parking that occurs only on those peak volume days.
Yeah.
You know, it would simply be either a cost to the business, an opportunity cost to the business, meaning we just won't do those visits. We had a contract in place with the casino for overflow parking, which was very unsuccessful because as soon as people pulled out and started heading north, they just kept on going. I think we had an 8% return ratio. We'd hand them a card, say park here, we'll come get you. And 8% of those cars got returned in terms of people parking there. So it just wasn't working once they're heading north and continuing north. So the real solution would be a parkade, but the finance of that will never make sense. So opportunity cost is a real
Yeah, and
answer.
also active transportation from the city.
Yeah, so-
Busing people up.
So for example, this summer, we're going to buy 125 to 150 passes to support that, so the staff will buy it for free. And we will continue to do that and hope that public transit continues.
Great. Bye.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can, and you're from Ministry of Transportation, is that right?
Shall I recuse and let Don have a seat?
No, you can still join us. I'm just, if we were to look at specific safety issues at, particularly this chief access egress, gondola, Shannon Falls intersection, in terms of improvements to the highway based on your experience, and I don't know if MOTI wants to comment or not, but what could we, like what would be the first steps to helping us along that? Like, I know that MOT doesn't like roundabouts, for example. But what are some of the solutions we can look at? Because these are just terrible accidents waiting to happen. So there's very serious safety concerns. What can we do?
Right, well, I think that, and I'm sure Don will speak to this, there's a range of things you could do. You could put no post everywhere and not allow any left turns. So my view is you're just pushing, there's going to be U-turns further afield, so that's not a really good, so you can, try and restrict the lefts. Then you try and serve the lefts. So how best to serve the lefts? You can put in a signal, but there's the associated, whenever you put in a signal, you slow down through traffic, and one of the ministry's objectives, of course, is to service longer distance through traffic. You also create additional safety issues when you put a signal in, particularly in a high-speed environment. So it's always a trade-off, signal, no signal. You can start to look at grade separations. You can have overpasses that are connected with ramps so that people can make U-turns without actually turning on the highway. They can, just like at Porto Cove, which is the U-turn route, you can come off and make U-turn that way. So, but these things escalate in costs. Like, restricting all the lefts is the cheap solution. I just put more no posts out there. Putting a signal in is more expensive when you have operational and speed issues. Then you get into grade separation, and overpasses are millions and millions of dollars. So I guess similar to Kirby's comments about, is it economically worth it? I think that's what, when the ministry looks at these things, those are the range of solutions they would look at, and look at the costs and benefits and impacts in a multiple account evaluation. So we have shared all this information with the ministry, and have, it was our recommendation that a more formal study be conducted in this corridor. This is at our January workshop. We were told to submit a transportation impact assessment study for the Klahani site in order to instigate that work. It's my personal view that that is not the forum in which to address this corridor-wide issue, which is not generated by the Klahani site itself. So I think that it's a separate study that hopefully is led by the ministry. Don probably has something to say about that.
I don't know if Don wants to join us or not, but
You want to join us, sir?
yeah, I mean, just to continue a little bit along that, I mean, it's not ideal. There's a long-term solution that needs to be had here. Looking for what that tipping point is that the province would actually start to go, okay, we need to make this capital investment in this intersection. But is there enough proper directional signage or whatever to say that safe U-turn route or roundabout route or whatever you want to call it? Like, there seems to be, coming out of the gondola, there's very little direction for people who are trying to go south on how to get there.
Yeah.
Like, are there some easy, quick solutions that we can at least minimize some of the dangerous stuff out there while we figure out how to do a long-term solve on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think at an absolute minimum, there needs to be either signage as you exit to a safe U-turn route, follow directions. There could be information provided in the cabs going down. This is how you turn around safely, so that it's available to everybody that's actually going down and exiting.
We
Yeah.
did do basically a test last year with a electronic signboard on the highway that we manually flip over to say parking for Shannon Falls, Sea to Sky Gondola, Chief next left on those busy days, just that they would park at Darrell Bay first. And our counters did not work for the majority of those days, so we can't actually tell. Nor do we have easy access to MOT transit data to try and figure out how many cars we're actually diverting. So it's a test worth repeating and doing better to see if there is a way to. But that all presupposes that Darrell Bay will remain parking and available for parking into the distant future. So, but I would concur with your point. Signage isn't adequate.
Don, do you want to help us out here?
Well, we do have no left turn signs, essentially, no U-turn signs at both the FSR as well as coming out of, there's two locations where we have no U-turn. The one thing we did ask, and unfortunately Jesse left because he went to work with you guys, so I don't know if that has been done, was to look at.
You're blaming us.
Yeah. Just for silly him. Was to look at putting a sign to encourage people to go up into Chief to use the roundabout. The issue of the roundabout at Darrell Bay was to have separation between the highway, so vehicles to go in, turn, and come out. It's not so much that we're anti-roundabout, but off the highway, off the main highway. I wasn't in this job when the Sea to Sky was being looked at. As far as a left turn, I know that would require construction of an additional lane, basically to put the left turn in. So more likely construction would come towards the water side.
Ironically, I think it's mostly there because it's the acceleration lane coming out of the Chief parking lot extends almost right in front of the, I just looked at on the map here, it literally, that acceleration lane going southbound from the Chief extends almost right in front of the Sea to Sky gondola.
My understanding initially it was because of that very lane and its proximity to the gondola that prohibited it from
Exactly.
being accessed. So you've got a conflict between the ins and outs of the two. What would be the
Exactly.
two lanes?
And that would be the issue, right?
So can we at least get that safe?
Yeah, that was one of the things that
signage?
we'd ask. And
I don't know if this sounds like a stupid idea or not, but on those 10 peak days, it's likely that Shannon Falls we can get peak days from Shannon Falls because they're the ones using the Darrell Bay parking and the pedestrians, like you just saw that dad and the kid running literally and almost getting smoked right in that video. On those 10, 12 peak days of the year, can we get crossing guards for the 4 hours that it's busy, like just something, whether it's through parks or through somebody, some added help to keep people safer. I don't know if that's a solution or not, but the pedestrians in that area, it's very challenging, problematic. And I agree with Susan. I mean, we're doing a pilot project this year to bring, at least help get some of the locals and some of your workers using public transportation instead. Hopefully that's successful at alleviating a little bit of the burden and giving people an option. So we're working on that stuff with BC Transit.
Well, I think that is, I mean, there is room on, again, the southern side of the highway when you come from between Shannon Falls and the Gauntlet there. There's the creek crossing underneath the highway, so that impinges it. But there's room on that shoulder for another lane. And I say that not being a traffic expert, I've just walked it to see what that experience is like. And then what would that afford? I'm not sure if a longer egress lane into the Gauntlet helps at all. If there's something else that can be done, if you look at the realignment to create an in and out. I would also say that one of the things, and I don't know, maybe you guys can answer this, but if there's spa visitation and day visitation, like surely that will increase pedestrian traffic to Shannon Falls as well to some extent from resort owners and visitors. So I would only anticipate that regardless of the use of, whatever, you remove those 82 stalls from Darrell Bay, there will be an equal, if not increase of pedestrian traffic to the falls. So I don't see that going away until Darrell Bay goes away as parking regardless.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe provide a fuller context. It's really been Kalahani who's paid for Bunt's time, who paid for the workshop in which Sea to Sky and District, as well as Ministry of Transportation and Parks were invited to. And I think we've done that because we're concerned. We see a huge opportunity, and that's your waterfront and your Southern Gateway across from 2 provincial parks and an amazing outdoor adventure experience with Sea to Sky. But we also see everyone pointing at each other. And we see a trend of increased tourism. And if you think it's busy now, you give it 10 years. And this issue will only become more exacerbated. And I think the surprise that came out of this when Bunt ran their first numbers was everyone thought it was Sea to Sky was the problem. Kirby, you're just too damn popular, and you're driving too much traffic. And it's driving all the problems here. Well, it turns out it's not really Sea to Sky. You have room to expand, there's challenges around expanding, but you're doing fine, apart from those 10 days.
If I could clarify, parking-wise, however, driving infractions are
Sure.
yeah.
Sea to Sky, yes, to your point, we have U-turn issues, we have pedestrian crossing, jaywalking issues around that. But the real sleeper here is the provincial park, specifically Shannon Falls, which is a very dated piece of infrastructure supporting the Shannon Falls visitation. They're just getting kind of scot-free, and yet it's a provincial asset. And Darrell Bay and Shannon, the Kalani site, so really the lands on the waterfront side are the ones taking the burden for what is an upland parking issue. Really destination issue. And I think from a business point of view, Symphony Resorts is looking seriously at, there's great promise here on this site, but also a lot of problems, and these problems are historical. And because of the mix of jurisdictions between the province, the parks, highways, as well as private business, no one seems to be wanting to get everyone together to look at this in a comprehensive sort of way. And so this was done again at Symphony's cost and time. And yet we have yet to make a development application. And this is part of our evaluation process of, is this really worth it? So unless this can be solved, it doesn't bode well for bringing a $500 million resort to this site. So I think that was why we wanted to get out of the realm of anecdote and individual solutions and get into the world of objective empirical study. Is this sufficient to afford multi-million-dollar upgrades? No, not at all. But it has led to our parking and access workshop. It has led to this. And I would definitely encourage everyone at the table to stop pointing fingers and begin to find collective solutions.
Thank you for that comment, Sue.
It's your investment decision, and if you don't feel the parking is adequate enough, I guess that's your decision. But being told that we're pointing fingers, I think we've worked collaboratively with the Minister of Transportation on numerous things. This is a provincial issue. Maybe you should write a letter. So I just think that, we're doing a lot. We've worked with the Sea to Sky Gondola. They have a lease on our land. We've done a lot with active transportation. We need to do better for sure. It's difficult when you have an amazing tourism infrastructure pointing northbound to get southbound, and that affects our infrastructure as well. But all of it costs money and takes time and resources. And we've expanded quite quickly with tourism infrastructure, which is why you're probably in our community. So I'd like to explore the active transportation, and with maybe Gary, that southbound access. My biggest concern is pedestrians leaving, because if they're walking on the highway, like people are saying, that needs to be addressed right away. Either we have to point them into the Shanty Falls so they can walk on the trail, they can walk the trail to get to Sea to Sky Gondola, or we have to have a separation on the highway in the buffer zone there. And I think that would be a quick fix. It's just maybe pushing the no barriers out a bit and having a place where the pedestrians can walk safely, because having them walk on the highway is not an acceptable solution. And also the southbound active transportation route needs to be better addressed with cycling. You currently can't ride your bike to the gondola from downtown. So the people that are going northbound from the Sea to Sky Gondola all have to, if they're going southbound again, they have to do a U-turn, and they generally turn into our roads to do that by Rose Park there, and then do a U-turn at Rose Park. So that intersection is being strained as well. We wonder why Cleveland's so difficult. This is also feeding into that problem. So I don't think just expanding parking, like the parks have capacity, the infrastructure has capacity, and just adding more cars is not a solution. We need either shuttle bus or active transportation, and those are absolutely within our decision-making ability. So working together, I'm absolutely sure we can find the solution, and you bringing people up as well, maybe utilizing the parking lot, but you're in for a very difficult solution there because of the lack of land. Either you take away some of your land that creates monetary value for you in order to increase parking, or you're purchasing art. The solutions are difficult solutions because they always remove your return on investment. So those are decisions you have to make with your land base, and we can facilitate things as we go along, but we only have the decisions that we can make through our budgeting and infrastructure.
Certainly, and to clarify, Squamish has been nothing but supportive of us, and the mayor in particular has been very helpful in understanding the local process. My finger pointing is more directed at the Provincial Ministry of Parks and the Provincial Ministry of Transportation Highways, as they say, well, it's not our issue, that's not our mandate, and yet the larger overriding mandate is one of tourism, in which everyone, both public and private sector, has to try and make accommodation. So we fully agree with you. Just to clarify, the potential for Klahani Resort is that they would provide all of their own parking for the resort on site in an underground facility. And certainly, I think one of the frustrating things that came out, if I just can for a moment, one of the frustrating things that came out of the Parking and Access Workshop is we had Bunce pursue various solutions. So how do you solve this? And of course, there have been a number of solutions posed over the years, including one by Sea to Sky, which is using part of the Klahani lands by Olson Creek for additional parking. So we wanted to, again, move it from the realm of anecdote into empiricism, try to put numbers and traffic volumes to it. And what came out of it is everything is expensive, everything's messy, and everything requires cross-cooperation. And so one of the things that Bahadur has taken away with and mulled over his spring break was, how does Klahani come back to the table that we've invited everyone to with some potential solutions. And one of them is, well, what if Klahani had a pedestrian bridge from the Klahani site kind of where the restaurant is, across into Shannon Falls, and removing that risk of people walking at grade into the park, and essentially from the water side, onto the upland side, accessing both Shannon Falls, Sea to Sky, and Stoneham Cheap. And then what if this Klahani development not only providing underground parking for its own guests, but also expanded through a couple other floors, provide paid parking that would take some of the loading off of the Darrell Bay intersection. So I think we very much want to be part of the solution, but I wanted to make it also very clear that, as Kirby finds, there's a financial cost benefit, and it's easy to throw out solutions, but if they don't fall within that benefit range, then they're just not going to happen.
Thank you. Doug?
Yeah, thanks. So, interesting, I'm one of the people, like everybody else in Squamish, who goes to the gondola that makes a turnaround at the light, but I don't do it like we do in the pictures. I've experimented over the years and either go into the left turn lane and stop, wait for the light, and then go up the Shannon Falls Road and turn and come back, or just go in to Klahani, wait for the light to change when you're standing there, sitting there, and then make a turn back onto the highway. So you can do it a little safer, but I appreciate a lot of people don't take that extra time and wait for the light. This is, to me, is a lot of different solutions with a lot of different peoples, and there's probably no silver bullet here. I agree with you, it will only get busier. I think that's the one thing we can absolutely count on. And I think there's a lot of different players. I think the district, for example, to increase bus service. Most of the traffic almost undoubtedly would come from the south. That doesn't necessarily accommodate that, unless the district is also in some fashion prepared to put parking somewhere within the district to shuttle people back and forth. And you basically just close off the parking lots at some point and shoot people there. And if they keep on going north, so be it. But otherwise, you've got parking for them somewhere within the district with a regular bus service. Active transportation, sounds attractive, but I think the reality is, apart from people in Squamish that might use it on nice days, people from the south aren't going to cycle up. They usually just go to Starbucks, turn around, and come back. So I don't think it's going to solve that part of the problem. We're dealing primarily with vehicle traffic in the south. The gondola has landed there without a left in and a left out. And that's an obvious, immediate problem. I think it's a provincial problem. It's a provincial highway, and that to me is the quick fix, because if you take away the U-turn options on the highway, then where do people go? I mean, going south, you have to go practically to Britannia before you can turn around. So these things just don't become practical unless you're going to do that. It's difficult dealing with MOTI. We've been trying, as Councillor Pryor said, for years on a variety of things, and we've sort of been banging our heads against the wall on the Cleveland Avenue intersection. We got nowhere with them on the right on the north end of the town, out of the Garibaldi Springs area. We've suggested a couple of times that they reduce the speed limit, and when you think about it, from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen is probably less than a mile, and if you just drop the speed limit to 60 km, that alone would make it a generally safer environment, because from the left side of the screen into town, past the Squamish Nation Reserve, it's 60 km already. Now, the Squamish Nation seemed to have enough pull with the government to get the speed limit reduced to 60 km. Somehow we don't seem to, and I talked to a lot of other people who run into MOTI, and the mindset seems to be that their goal is to get people to Whistler as fast as possible, no matter what the cost is. And that inevitably is also a cost of human safety. So it's an unfortunate mindset. And I think the only way we're going to change that is to deal with the minister and to get the minister on board to look at this. But that area, if you look at all the concentration, and we talked about it in a number of other formats, is becoming a tourist hub. And we've encouraged that. We want to see that happen. The province is going to have to get into that as well. But there's different players. I mean, I look at the developer, and somebody else made the comment, I don't think this is the developer-created problem. Absolutely not. However, the developer is going to have guests there who probably came partly to go up the gondola and go to Shannon Falls, and I think they would want to make sure that they got from the resort to that part safely. And so they might have some part to play in getting pedestrians, because people aren't going to drive there from that resort, hopefully not. Get pedestrians across the highway at that point and be able to go back and forth between the gondola and Shannon Falls, the two attractions there. So, contributions to those types of things from different parties. The gondola has a role to play in that as well, I think, as part of that attraction. But fundamentally, to me, we've got to get the province inside. The developer can contribute to it in some fashion with pay parking and something, go for it. If you can work that into your business plan, that's great. The other thing that I think is certain is in the long run, the district parking that's at Darrell Bay is not going to be parked in some fashion, whether it's paved grass over or there is some other use, but it's not going to be an overflow parking lot for very long, not in the foreseeable future. So I think it really is a combination of things, maybe joint lobbying, but with the pressure we've all collectively got, that actually will make the most difference.
Ted, then Patty, and then we're gonna.
Yeah, thanks. Well, that's, a lot of truth in that, but, I'll get in with the finger pointing too.
Oh, next.
And it's, someone has to spearhead. And who? Who's going to spearhead this? I mean, there's a lot of work in figuring all this kind of stuff out. And, who would have thought we'd have we have parking problems up here too, so you can't find a big parking lot up here and bust them down. But it made me think of the Fraser Basin Council. And, Bob Purdy, I don't know if anybody knows him. But the Fraser Basin, their job is to coordinate problems for anybody in their area. And, we had Bob Purdy come up here years ago and negotiate a problem that we were having with the chip reload facility. And anyway, I think he might be worth following that guy for spearhead, because he is province. Is Fraser Basin, is it province or federal?
It's an independent council.
Oh, is it?
Nonprofit.
Okay, well anyway, that's what their job is. And they look for problems where people are not
They're
communicating.
facilitators, like conveners.
Yeah, and do a really good job. So I recommend we talk to those guys because, and I don't want to sound negative or anything, but these kind of problems, like Doug said, we've been 10 years at the intersection out there and, we haven't made any headway. And we write letters and lobby and so unless we can find someone in particular to spearhead this, we'll be here next year talking about this.
Thanks, Ted. Patty?
So I thank you, Don, for coming in, Kirby. And I want to thank Kalani too. I mean, you did sort of take the initiative to do this, recognizing this is a conversation that has to happen, and you didn't need to do that, and I appreciate that, because I think it's provided a foundation for some action, hopefully, and further problem solving, hopefully. You did say you've alluded to the province that a more formal study should be done of this area. And I guess my question is through to Don, how do you suggest that we go about trying to get this on MOTI's work plan to do an actual strategic vision of this area, more of a formalized study on some of the problem solving that needs to happen?
Send us a letter. Send it through.
I'm going to keep sending a letter like once a day.
No, send it to me,
Okay.
and then I will go through to Ashok and say, look, we need some funding to.
Making a
to
formal
look at this.
request?
Yeah.
Yeah, and from my point of view, to be honest, I think the parking is sort of a secondary issue. Technologies are going to evolve over the next 10, 20 years. We need to get active transportation going. We need public transit. All those things are going to come into play. I'm seriously not actually worried about allowing for more parking for Shannon Falls or the chief or for your business, Kirby. That's not my priority. The safety of those intersections is my priority, and giving people options to get to those amenities outside of the car are my priorities. And I kind of do agree with Paul in that we have been kind of doing the pointy finger thing. And we have this, as Doug was saying, we have this sort of albatross in our community called the Sea to Sky Highway. It's not our asset. it defines us in too many ways, but we don't have the money or the means, or particularly even the mandate, to put the capital infrastructure into it. But we do have to keep poking and prodding and pursuing it, because it does affect our citizens' day-to-day existence. So we, from my point of view, I think we can be that champion to push the issue. But we have to make sure that the province, both MOE and Ministry of Transportation, are at the table, willing to come forward with the solutions. I'll add a little bit to what Doug said. We do have a bit of a challenge in the district in that this isn't our only hotspot. The Cleveland intersection is the most accident-prone intersection on the Sea to Sky Highway. And we have a little bit of a, okay, well, they'll solve this and then they won't solve this. We can only put so much money into a certain area. So we have a little bit of a prioritization issue, because we need that Cleveland intersection fixed yesterday. There's a business case for it. There's more money put into ICBC claims and emergency services and healthcare in that intersection per year that costs to fix the intersection once, or at least reduce the amount of accidents. So we need that one done, but it can't be at this, we can't sort of do this and say, oh, well, Squamish gets this one, but they don't get this one. We've got a package of issues that we need to address with MOTI. So we're going to send you a letter, and hopefully we get a positive response back that Cleveland Avenue intersection is going to be fixed.
Already sent a response to.
And that we're going to get a formalized study of this area and some quick fixes in terms of maybe some just clear signage to help alleviate some of the current existing problems. That would be good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just wanted to go to the crowd. I saw a hand out there.
Thank you.
If you want to come speak, you have to come to the table.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Rick Wasson. I'm the current
You can go to the podium or the
Go to the
table,
podium.
yeah.
Okay, I'll go to the podium.
Ooh.
Please do not touch the microphone, okay. So I'm Rick Poissant is my name, and I'm the current manager of the Klahani Lands. And a couple of issues I'd just like to bring up is, we've come to the conclusion that there's many parties involved and somebody needs to spearhead this. Now, but in the meantime, what is the short-term solution? Patricia was there just for one day and heard an accident. I listened to those accidents all week long. Fender benders, screeching of tires. And that's only half of it. The screaming of mothers trying to get their children off the highway after something like that happens is, really horrific. I don't see any police presence in that area. I don't know why they're not there doing some ticketing. Maybe during peak times we need to have a physical person there where the Parks pays for it as a pedestrian police patrol for helping children. There was one video I saw that Bund had done where a whole busload of children were trying, she didn't show it today, but a whole busload of children were trying to cross that intersection with cars diverting, between the children. So I think it's just a matter of time before somebody loses a life. And I'm really worried that this just might be the year. It's getting busier and busier. And once that happens, we're all going to be looking at each other across the table saying, well, I thought you were spearheading it. I thought, the ball was in your court. So, maybe some police presence and some patrol. Secondly, there is potential for additional parking. Kiewit, when they built the highway, they leased some land from the natives. A big tract of land. They had their office and some parking in there. It's a big flat area it's not shown on the map there, I don't believe. But there's potential for some parking there.
The south end or the north end?
On the south end.
Up here.
I'm sorry, the north end. On the north end, on the west side of the highway, across from the Forestry Road.
Here.
Yeah.
Same intersection as the casino. A little further up, I don't think we're showing it there. But there is potential, and that's about the same distance as Darrow Bay is to the gondola, but just in the opposite direction. And they also have a traffic light there, so maybe some of the parking could be diverted up to that area. I don't know if that's been explored or not. The last thing I'd like to bring up is the district, about a year ago, 10 months ago, they did put an ad in the newspaper asking people to come forward who had interest in the use of Darrow Bay. And several parties, LNG, the gondola, Jeff Levine, who wanted to have some kayaking in that area, a boat launch, all these people came forward. And then nothing became of the study. And I just was curious to know which department, spearheaded that and what became of it.
Coming next week. Gary, it's coming next week, isn't it, part of it?
Is that in? Oh, no, wood fibre
Yeah.
is coming next week, yes. I don't know that we've moved those conversations around the respective parties there, because we were waiting on wood fibre, and it's only recently we found out what exactly they want, and that's coming next week.
And
So you don't want us spearheading it?
no, part of the direction from council was all the parties talk and help provide a solution instead of us just picking one or two. It was parties get together, so there is, the initiative was put back in the interested parties' lap to help come up with solutions.
So there's lots of problems happening down in Darrow Bay as far as drug deals late at night, illegal camping. Somebody has recently abandoned a camper down there, and it's teetering on the edge of the water. It's been there for, gee, I don't know, it's been there for 8 months. I phoned the district, and the bylaw officer came by and said, well, we don't have jurisdiction because the first 5 feet belongs to Fisheries and Oceans, so he walked away, and it's still sitting there.
Is it?
A derelict camper for, gotta be at least 10 months now. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of garbage accumulates down there, there's illegal campfires happening down there, so no policing is really happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Yeah, when you talk about some of the numbers that you've given us, 1/3 of all the traffic in the corridor, 300 people per hour in peak crossing through that intersection, 300 U-turns an hour. I think that the potential for cost and life in there is...
304 hours.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Still quite very high. I think we're just kind of flirting with disaster here, and as everybody has said, that it's only going to go up. The user, excuse me, the usership of that area. I think maybe speaking to the RCMP about some patrols through there would be useful. I'm looking forward to having an MOT study in there. Very, very helpful. I'll take one more comment and then we're going to move on. Thank you.
I want to reiterate something Mayor said, which I thought was extremely important, is that this is in the end highways and parks, which is, you know, really our public domain, and our financing goes into municipal infrastructure, and we can do what we can. You know, I think the active, the bus service, when I say active transportation, I'm mostly referring to bus service. And that the Cleveland intersection is far more important to me, even though this is incredibly important. I think that there's lots that can be done, RCMP does it, and having somebody there, maybe it's either the Sea-to-Sky gondola, because most of the turns crossing the pedestrians are going to the gondola. I think those are all really great solutions and can happen immediately. But as far as the Ministry of Transportation, I really have to reiterate what the Mayor said about Cleveland Avenue and the amount of accidents, also being driven by the same traffic flow. So our infrastructure, the stuff that we can fix, has to be financed by the district, and you know, already providing park service with municipal buses is a stretch for us, and a stretch for a limited budget. But I think increasing that capacity, and just having a summer service, is something that can be, you know, people can stay in Squamish. We do have, apparently we have no parking problem according to our staff. But, you know, shopping downtown and then using the bus to get to a park service. I think that's an entire re-education program and not an infrastructure problem. So I look forward to everybody working together. And I so appreciate the study you've done. That's fantastic information, and really drives the problem home so we can start getting working on these things.
Yes, and thank you for coming and for also for sharing that with the province.
So let us know when you get it figured out, eh?
Gary, this is
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time this afternoon.
Appreciate it. Thank you for yours. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which would be road design discussion with Chris Wickham, our Director of Engineering.
Gary wants you.
It'd be great to get that one.
That's the presentation.
Awesome.
Thanks
Thanks,
for
Don.
coming. Sir, the floor is yours.
My name is Chris Wickham. I'm the Director of Engineering. I've brought Laura Princik, Municipal Engineer, and Gloria Dunn, who's Sustainability Coordinator, who leads up both transit and active transportation. and we are at your mercy for whatever conversation you'd like to have.
Okay, I'm just gonna take that comment.
Well, yeah, I put this on the agenda partially as a conversation, a sort of a stemming from a conversation we had about neighborhood road speeds a couple months ago, and partly from having a preliminary discussion as we go into the subdivision development control bylaw and sort of rejigging how we design roads. And I just wanted council or the committee to have an opportunity to talk about what our expectations are there leading into it, sort of getting out in front of that conversation in terms of what our goals are. We did talk about reducing speeds in neighborhoods, potentially down to 30 kilometers an hour, but need the road design to support that piece. And that was ironically from the conversation before, it's like we could reduce the road to 60, but that just makes everyone a speeder, not actually reducing speed. So you need to have road design and other strategies to actually reduce the actual speeds people are going. So I just wanted council to have the committee to have an opportunity to sort of maybe just inform this a little bit. And I guess I'm looking for where are we with the subdivision and development control bylaw in terms of its evolution. It looks like we're not going to get it before the end of this term, but wanted to make sure that those conversations were happening. One of the things, wondering if staff was aware of, was the NAPCO. Have you heard of NAPCO? Mm-hmm. It seems to be more geared towards membership in larger cities, although smaller cities can be members too. But how well are we integrating real progressive road design? And when I say road, I mean the active transportation interfaces with the road design. You know, and how progressive are we being in terms of trying to achieve best in show? It's a dog term, but
I'm happy to take a stab at that. So interestingly, the cross-sections in the existing subdivision and development control bylaw are actually fairly progressive. They have travel lanes that are 3.3 to 3.5 meters, which is relatively small. It's not as petite as you'll see in some cities, in neighborhoods with the street parking and like places like Vancouver. Also we have things like the bump outs, landscape bump outs that narrow, they sort of effectively almost chicane the road to a smaller width, again, and create that visual the desire to slow down because it gets narrower. Now, I want you to keep in mind that what's going on right now, we're sitting on a whole bunch of brownfield projects that are in progress in terms of development projects. And then we're also sitting on a whole bunch of infill projects that are all sort of just ready. They're just at the tipping point of actually being implemented soon. So unfortunately, you're not seeing many examples in living color yet of what this is going to look like, but we have designs that we've already got servicing agreements in place, or we're working on them to create like those mid-block pedestrian bump outs for mid-block crossings, and more curb bulges on the corners to reduce those pedestrian crossing distances. And I think these will have a bigger effect. We're actually going to narrow, for example, the curb, we're going to bring the curbs in on 2nd Avenue, just the block north of here, to actually narrow the street, so that we'll take away the angle parking, make it into parallel. So all these things are in progress, but we haven't seen them yet. And they are more or less in alignment with the current subdivision development control bylaw. So in terms of the updates to it, there isn't going to be a whole lot of change to that. I mean, we have some changes in mind just in terms of slightly better ways and more progressive ways of managing things. We just don't have a lot of examples to show you on the ground.
and I guess that's why I wanted the conversation is I'm hoping we're going to see quite a more ambitious change in our subdivision development control bylaw. I'd like to see us get down to 3-meter wide lanes in a lot of our neighborhoods, not 3.3 or 3.5. So I guess the challenge is some of these things aren't under subdivision development control bylaw. We have all these big brownfield sites coming forward, and I want to make sure we don't do this, and we actually are realizing what we should be realizing on those sites, in particular, let alone any other things that may come forward. So.
Sue?
Thank you. Yeah, I totally appreciate that. That's a really great comment that we have a lot of projects coming, and that's an understatement. So that's also my crazy concern, is that our road design wasn't intended to have density in the downtown. And now we see, I mean, the amount of traffic downtown and in our commercial areas is crazy. There's people speeding on our roads up and down because they're so wide. In particular, like Winnipeg, Victoria, all those streets are incredibly wide. We don't have a lot of density projects planned for them. We don't have safe places we don't have sidewalks for kids to walk around on. So now we're putting pedestrians and cars, speeding cars on streets that aren't adequately built. But we also have one exit out of, and a massive amount of density with no real second exit planned for an incredibly long time, with no real land use planning around that or road use planning. I know that I'm sure we've kicked the can around, but just watching these projects sell and seeing the amount of cars that are going to be in our downtown, we need to start, when we started this term, all of us said that we wanted a separated bike lane on Cleveland Avenue. We actually had a committee on it, and we, some of us, it was laid out in the active transportation plan, the one corridor that's safe. And now we're going to have I really worry about the business park as well, because, we have speeding cars across Government Road now, and we put kids infrastructure in there. We put like gyms, climbing gyms, and the most, and all the pleasure district stuff that's going on in there. So the entire pleasure district is going to have people active commuting there.
Little Amsterdam.
Exactly, it will be. There's 14 craft breweries going on. People are going to make that tourism. How are we thinking about accommodating our roads in that area in particular?
Lots of ways. So this is like very hot topic amongst ourselves right now. Every single development file that's coming in is getting picked over with a fine-tooth comb of like, okay, frontage, let's talk about this. What's the pedestrian solution? What's the cycling solution? What's the access solution? What's the intersection safety? We spend, and sometimes feels like an inordinate amount of time going back and forth with the developers, engineers, trying to get it all perfect. And of course, somebody's going to be unhappy at the end anyway, but hopefully more people will be happy than not. So we're contemplating roundabouts. We're sensitive to the fact that some of these intersections, the queuing during peak times to get left off commercial and industrial way onto Queensway is getting ridiculous, and yet...
May I interrupt you? Mm-hmm. You're excellent. I'm glad. New applications and cars and bad lineups for cars. I don't care about cars. Cars have lots of access. In this town, we have a highway that people can get back and forth on. I'm worried about the pedestrians and the cyclists and their safety with the lineups of cars and the roundabouts. And great solution with roundabouts, but we have old infrastructure on Government Road, and not a lot of people are still maintaining their single-family homes, and we still have wide roadways and no cycling access. In the 7 years I've been, we have a great active transportation budget. I know we think about these things with new applications. I know the staff are amazing with dealing with new applications and ensuring that we move forward. How do we deal with these, the car lineups, or getting cars out of these areas so that it can be more pedestrian friendly, so that people are encouraged not to use cars? If they want to use cars, they can use a highway. But getting to these areas within our community could be more active transportation, and we've got better bus service. We've got starting to encourage more cycling. But without a safe way to do that, people are not going to get out of their cars.
See, that's the constant battle that we struggle with. Is we have the active transportation budget, but we've got 4 decades of infrastructure that doesn't work. It isn't going to get fixed in 4 years. It's not going to get fixed in 20 years. It's going to take decades to fix a problem that took decades to create. So it's a slow process, and we work on that. We have the active transportation plan. We have the active transportation budget. Council keeps increasing that for us. We love that. We'll spend it all. It's just going to take some time. And some of those projects, some of those big projects like Government Road are difficult to fix and they are very expensive to fix. So those are going to take a little longer. So.
Thanks. Doug?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it was my first term that we brought a review of the subdivision control bylaw back, and one of the things that, if I recall correctly, was contemplated was narrowing some of the secondary roads in some of the subdivisions. And I happen to live on a street that I'm told by the plow drivers is one of two narrow streets in the Highlands. And the problem is when you try to clear snow, or when we have a snowfall, that when people park on both sides of the street, as they do because nobody uses their garages, the plow can't get done. And so now, staff stepped in and cured that problem last term, actually by just saying in the wintertime, between November and I think the end of March or something, it's parking on one side of the street only, which now, for that particular little street that doesn't go anywhere, has solved that problem. But it's not the only one, and if we are going to try and shrink the streets and do cutouts and things like that, I think one of the things we have to always think about is, of course, snow clearing and how does it work when there's snow, because we do get it. And the other is with respect to some of the comments, the existing areas, I think, are also an issue, and for me, it's partly regulation. With these narrower streets and parking on one side, for example, during the winter is one form of regulation, but the other is, I think, of Kitsilano in Vancouver, an area I grew up in, and was just actually coincidentally driving in last week, and it is an existing neighborhood, of course, been there for decades, but it's full of traffic on it. It's all been retrofitted, and there's bike lanes through these secondary streets. But there's roundabouts, there's all kinds of things done to control traffic speeds through these predominantly residential neighborhoods. And that to me is one of the ways we might approach the downtown. I take the point that some of these things are very expensive solutions, and just for the record, I am not talking about speed bumps. I know there's an issue with speed bumps for a bunch of technical reasons. But there are other traffic calming techniques that we can consider. Speed limits might be one of them that can help control traffic that may be of a more modest cost that we can start doing in some of the priority areas, the other residential areas. So that's part of the infrastructure. It's not the new stuff that's coming on I'm more concerned about, but how we retrofit all the existing parts of the community and the cost of it. That is certainly a concern. But I think it's sort of the regulation and retrofitting is part of where we want to go.
Thanks. Tim? Danny on deck?
Yep, thanks. I gotta get ahead of that guy because he uses up all my ideas. Well, the old neighborhoods, I mean, our downtown, at least, our streets downtown are dead ends. So there's not, like in Kitsilano, you can go 40 blocks. And so you go 5 and then you gotta slow down. But I do see, I like that idea in any of our neighborhoods. And of course, I think that is in our transportation and our plan. I think it is in our plan to slow down those areas when there's development to pay for it. Because when we started 7 years ago, there was no bike lanes. There was no real contemplation of bike lanes. And like we took that on. I mean, that's a huge step. I think we've come miles, and just to support what Gary's saying, I mean, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff coming, but we've got 2,000 places being built in the downtown while the road's not done yet. It will be. The frontage of all those roads will be done. So, I mean, I like the idea of slowing down the speed limits in some of the neighborhoods. That's something we can do. Can we not just say, okay, the roads in these neighborhoods are 30K now? Can't we just say that? We don't have to, so if you want to slow people down, we can do that. And, I guess that's about all I have to say. I think we're doing okay.
All right.
Yeah, my understanding is that TAC guidelines now allow roads to be as narrow, or lanes to be as narrow as 2.7 to 2.9. Like, TAC guidelines actually say you can do that. Yeah, and I don't think we should be building anything over 3.3, and then I think in fact we should be gearing towards 3 meters or less. Because our roads have been, especially in existing neighborhoods, the road right-of-way was established years ago, and every meter counts in those environments. So one of the things I'd like to see us do, and I wouldn't mind exploring particularly in certain key areas, and almost take it like a pilot project point of view, that we reduce the speeds in certain problematic areas. But we even think about, like, take almost a pilot project perspective on it, and do some inexpensive bump outs without having to go and do the big infrastructure pay, put some planters or some bollards or something that sort of helps to change people's patterns of driving, because simply putting a sign up will not change people's patterns of driving. So, but we take it as almost like a pilot project strategy, inexpensive way with bollards and planters or some simple way without having to redo all the infrastructure. And then that allows us to build towards legitimizing and actually moving towards improving that infrastructure in the long term as well. So if maybe staff could sort of just think about some of those pilot project areas that we could sort of do that kind of thing in, I think would be really helpful. The business park was laid out when it was intended to be an industrial park. And it's very car-centric and very not pedestrian and cyclist friendly at all. We did get a letter, was it today, about the intersection outside of the Toyota dealership, and with all the people going to the bakery and the breweries and that whole thing. I remember I must admit, I was sitting at Alpine on the deck, Alpine Brewing on the deck, and I just watched all the cyclists coming up the road going to Backcountry Brewing. It was tremendous. I think it was some festival weekend, but there was like the amount of people, Susan's right, the amount of people going in that area is just going up. So if we can figure out some traffic calming on Queensway, it's a straight shot. We need to, like, if we could just sort of earmark some of these problem areas and try to figure out how we do these affordable fixes that are maybe not the final fix, but are a strategy to get us to the final fix. That would be great.
And to that point, talking about the industrial park, I've noticed a lot of people coming out of the roundabout through Walmart and off of industrial, just waiting till the very last second. I'm going northbound on Queensway, and they're waiting till the last second. They see you coming, yet they're still pulling out in front of people. And to the point where I'm taking plate numbers now and calling it in, because it's so dangerous. They're just waiting. You're right in their face, and they're pulling out in front of you. And it's become crazy. They're darting in and out of that those access and on and off Queens. So traffic calming would be good in there. Yeah. Ted and Sue.
Yeah, thanks. On road widths, and I know everyone's careful on road widths because some of them are collectors, but all the streets we have, I think they're 66 feet, the existing ones, and then we're talking about going down to, how many meters did you say?
3.
For a 9-foot travel lane, so 2 9-foot travel lanes?
A bit more than that, but yeah.
That's the absolute bare minimum on a residential side street, a 6 meter facing curb to face curb.
I mean, we got to watch those because you want to get some parking in there, but.
No, this is a lane, not a road right away. I'm talking about a lane.
Just a drive lane.
Yeah. Just a drive lane.
Yeah, okay. And I really do like the planter areas, ideas for calming in areas like Denville or the downtown or anywhere where, like Sue says, going across Main Street, whichever one of those. Maine's got little bump outs, but a couple of big planters just on the side of the road would work as a bump out. That'd be good.
Thanks. The point of Queensway, just drilling in bollards, like having something that delineates the cycling lane and moving the parking to the outside. The parking is on the inside. I don't know why. We have parking on the inside that crosses over the cycling lane. Move the parking to the outside and put some bollards there so that cars don't have to cross the cycling lane constantly. And then you have a delineated bike lane because you'll have cars parked and that will separate the bike lane. Put some planters in. I'm not talking about forever changing our infrastructure, Gary. I know it takes a million years to make change. I've been doing this a while. And constantly reminds me of that guy that was congratulated over and over again in staff at the municipal council for raising the curb got 2 inches on a curb raised, and was like, congratulations on that big win.
It's like 18 years.
Yeah. Parks and Recreation. But yeah, I think there are simple solutions, and I think that even just for the summer, putting cement planters there and delineating the parking and making the parking Wellesley was separated in a day, and this is downtown Toronto. They just went and they drilled bollards all the way up and down Wellesley, and that was that. They left room for people to get in and out of their driveways, and they just put them where they could, not everywhere, and didn't infringe on anybody's property. But, looking for perfection, I'm not. I'm looking for a little bit of safety, and for my 11-year-old to not get hit by a car, which really does concern me because she rides her bike everywhere now. And I don't want to have to drive her places because I feel unsafe, because we have people that don't live in this community speeding, because it's not, it is both people living in this community and visitors, but the more visitors we get, and we saw the numbers, all driving into downtown and all speeding around and really getting, irritated and not being able to find places to park, and it just makes for really bad driving behavior. So having our kids get places safely, and our people that aren't exactly sober riding their bikes in delineated bike lanes would be amazing.
Just like to point out, drunk riding your bike is illegal too.
Exactly.
That's right.
And riding is driving.
Is that?
And it's harder than driving.
Very much, very good.
Just say it, right?
I've been told
my
that's
past
the
as well.
case
Okay, thanks. Chris, one
I-
final comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, 2 quick points. One, completely coincidentally, we had a 1-hour meeting on some excellent ideas on how to traffic on Queensway and how to move pedestrians through, because that is increasingly becoming pedestrian-centric, even, partially because of these businesses, partially because of people who are working there and are going for lunch, have these eateries, etc. I also just wanted, I think part of this conversation is a philosophical check-in, just council really wanting to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I don't think the council is aware of just how much time and effort the engineering staff puts into this, and just how passionate, especially the 2 individuals at the table. And I would call out Carrie Hamilton in planning as well, as there's sort of a triumvirate of active transportation in particular, and street design, and including a very large proportion of our training budget goes into courses and conferences and staying up to the minute. We have, in fact, the 3 in the triumvirate have been taking course on their own time, despite their busy lives, in order to upskill even more from where they are. It's very common, whenever anybody comes back from holiday anywhere, there's always pictures taken on, hey, look at this idea, look at that idea, and people are shooting things around, and we're working on changing the traffic light timing to increase pedestrian safety based on some very recent research. And it's something that the department is very passionate about, and I think I appreciate the opportunity to check in and just and brainstorm, because I know that you're very passionate about it, and you're thinking about this every time you're all on holidays too. So I think we're very much on the same page.
But thanks for your efforts, all of you. Thank you. Well, thanks very much.
So just on the subdivision development for Lava, what is sort of the timing on council getting that back? Or what's the sort of evolution of that?
The plan is to have it in front of you draft in June. No, before the recess. So this can get done before before the election.
And if you think there's anything else you want to touch base with the committee or council, like on storm management or something within that, make sure we get that on the agenda so we can make sure we're on that same page as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much. Anybody want to take a couple-minute break?
I think we're pretty much there. We'll just defer
Okay.
this to another time.
The first item?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One, two.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
oh, yes,
One
definitely.
more.
Okay. Our next item, which is the amendment to the agenda, which is the request for decision and referral by the SLRD. Anybody?
Yes, I have a quick presentation.
Thank you. Pull my bladder into.
Yeah, 3 slides. So the district has received a referral from the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District on an official community plan in electoral area D and a zoning bylaw amendment in that area in Britannia Beach. The property is highlighted, it's right, it's just north of the Britannia Beach Museum. It's a combination of two private parcels and a crown parcel. And the rezoning and the OCP amendment propose to expand the tourist commercial area on the site. There's already some commercial and community facilities there, and add 87 residential units, most of which are in townhouse form, but also some apartments. So the proposal is a 4-hectare site. In addition to the 87 residential units, there's 6,000 square feet of new commercial space proposed. As part of this application, there would have to be some flood and debris flow hazard mitigation that might actually benefit the highway or the safety level on the highway. The proposal includes heritage conservation, so there's 12 buildings that are going to be retained on site that are of heritage value. And the village commercial includes the daycare, a new daycare facility, a fitness center, and then refurbishment of the community hall that's there. The project is consistent with the area DOCP. It's within the 800 to 1,000 residential units that are allocated for Britannia Beach. However, it needs a redesignation of the site from open space and flood management to tourist commercial, mixed residential and park. The project is also consistent with the regional growth strategy, as well as the update that staff are working on to the RGS. So the site is located within a master plan community area, and the OCP amendment does not exceed the density threshold established in the OCP. So I just wanted to put it to let council know that we've gotten a referral, and our plan is to respond with no issues to the regional district, unless council wanted to provide feedback.
All right.
Can you put the map up? Just come briefly to.
This one or the site plan?
Oh, the other one, yeah. I'm just, I have to go through this whole thing, but this is mostly townhomes?
Yes, I think there's 60 or 73 townhomes, and the rest of them are apartments.
So 10 apartments?
Uh,
It says 87 residential.
87 units, 14 apartments,
14
and
apartments.
73
So
townhomes.
there's one small apartment building somewhere over the commercial, I'm assuming, or is it?
Not sure actually. I think this is the tourist commercial area, so this is commercial only,
Yeah,
and this is the
I'm not
residential.
actually, I'm just trying to, Doug had a tour with the developer last week, so maybe he can have more details. I think if we were to make, one thing, we talked about the SLRD is, that the SLRD, just like Squamish, we need to prescribe a certain amount of rental, covenanted rental.
Yes.
So that may be one comment we make.
And there are rentals in here.
Yeah, I just can't remember the exact number.
They're all the apartment units, the 14 are all rental.
Okay, so that's 7% or something.
No, that would be more like
8%.
15 or 16%.
Okay, that's good. It would be nice to have, these homogeneous developments where it's all the same kind of town home, just I think are going to be a dated vernacular, and it would be, maybe I'm just being picky here, but different mixed mixed types of housing, that missing middle housing and more diversity would be nice to have as well. I know it's hard to espouse something that we're not quite achieving yet either, however, we're articulating the ideal.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we're looking at it from is this regionally significant for the district to get involved? And it certainly doesn't seem to be. You know, it's only 7 units. The traffic impact is going to be fairly small in terms of the highway.
I mean, I quite like it, nice tourism.
Yeah, I think the fact that they're refurbishing some of those existing buildings and replacing them, and I think that's going to be a great addition to the corridor.
Thanks. Doug?
Yeah, you know, as one of the directors of the regional district, I was invited to a meeting with the developer last week and went down through the site with him and went through this in a little bit more detail. And you're correct, the rental apartments are above the commercial.
Oh, I see.
And the commercial, which is on the sort of the left half of that development, is a combination of refurbished existing buildings. And if you go down there now, some of them are up in blocks that have been moved around, and there's more work that's going on as we speak practically. And then the stuff on the right is the townhouse development that the mayor's talking about. And that's the way the land works, and because of the FCLs and so forth, it starts to grade up a little bit as you go from left to right as well. And they're going to quite great lengths to retain the existing mining buildings, and some of them are obviously being repurposed. There's a daycare going in and stuff. They have to move the post office, and there's issues like that. But it's actually the goal of the developer is to have businesses there that complement each other, and so they kind of and the community generally. So it's very much to serve that community as well as what highway traffic might stop there. But from a regional perspective, I mean, its effect in Squamish, I tend to agree with you. It would be, if anything, it complements the area, but I don't think it detracts from Squamish in any fashion.
Thank you. Ted?
Yeah, I agree. And I was trying to figure out which ones are the refurbished buildings, but I know that,
The pink ones.
All of them?
I think so.
yeah, that's what I kind of thought. And so, I mean, they're creating a nice little, you know, I mean, I can understand trying to keep it, they have the mine there, their whole town is kind of the museum, so I can't say that, looking at what we have, I couldn't criticize their design. You know, I mean, if they wanted to send us all sorts of pictures, then we might be able to criticize, but you know, I mean, I think it looks great, and Britannia down there, they've been working on this for years and years and years, and I know a few years ago, we weren't happy with the 3,000 that was planned for there, and now it's a lot less. And I'm just
Well,
happy.
it's different.
Difference, I guess.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, but that didn't go forward, that 3,000 one. I'm just saying that I'm happy to see they finally get something. You know, because all the people down there, they go, oh, I gotta go to Squamish, I ran out of milk, oh, I gotta go to Squamish, you know. We'll get all those people off the road, and I think it's great.
Sue?
Thanks. To that point, is there any, I think about this for regional transportation too, because those people aren't all going to work in those commercial spaces, and they will be commuting either north or south for work. Is this included in our regional transportation group?
Yeah, the SLD.
Yeah, the SLRDs, and thinking about regional transportation for this. This is important.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, there should be a bus stop.
There is going to be a bus stop, and I believe there's going to be bus laybys inside this commercial area.
Thank you. That would be my only comment.
Yeah, I, you know, without prejudging this, because it's coming to the SLRD board, you know, generally, from a Squamish context, have no issue with it at all. I'm glad to see the rentals in there. And the fact they're keeping the sort of the vernacular of the old town, I think is fantastic. I wanted to make sure there was a bus integration, a regional bus integration piece. And then the only other thing, this is interesting because this wouldn't be allowed until, this development wasn't allowed until the tunnel dam issues were resolved, which ironically I was the chair of the regional district, and I had lots of meetings on this. but the province finally resolved the tunnel dam issues, which allowed this to move forward. It's different than the Taichung land. And I think generally, happy to, so the referral would be, we basically say we have no problems, or?
Yeah, we're just gonna respond with, we don't have any comments.
Sure.
Just briefly on the points raised, there is a bus lay-by, it doesn't show on that, but they contemplate bus service, absolutely. Commuter, not internal, I don't think, but it's along the South Street. There's provision for a bus stop off. The other thing, and talk about keeping the vernacular, they actually, the developer was telling me, they had an expert come up and drill through the walls of some of the old buildings to go down to the first coat of paint to get the color. And they're going to repaint. I couldn't believe that.
Awesome.
That's apparently what they're doing. So they want to repaint most of those old existing buildings, which are basically the ones with the sort of the pinkish colored roofs in the original mining company colors. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of all that. Hope it's not all gray or something.
Is there an opportunity for us to actually write back in particular, we, no comments or generally supportive, but in particular, like the fact that they're retaining the heritage values and
Absolutely.
augmenting heritage values.
Yeah, we can include that in the
Supportive of the
response.
bus connectivity with transit, and the purpose-built rental covenanted in perpetuity.
So we don't need a motion, we just go back with a letter?
Yeah, I'm just gonna draft a letter to the district and respond.
Sure.
Excellent, thank you.
Looks great. Well, I'm looking at our agenda here, and I see that our first item is a no-show. So I'm going to refer that to another meeting.
Refer to me and I'll put it on
I'll refer this to Patty. And we'll deal with
Can I also, can we refer him to the BIA? He has not been to the BIA yet, so I'd like to make sure that he's actually contacted the BIA and has permission. Has permission? Well, has some sort of liaison with the BIA.
We can certainly make that suggestion. We can't force it.
Absolutely.
Okay, moving on, looking status of recommendations to the council, seeing none. Referrals from council, none. Any correspondence? None. Good discussion, I think we just had it. Ted?
Roundtable discussion on getting our design criteria changed so that developments that come on board now have to do a better job of giving us renditions of the job sites. Did you get what I sent in the email or something today? Sent an email out that shows the 25-foot lot, little addition on Cleveland. And I forgot to say push video because they have a video of, they've actually done a fly around of their little building. They superimpose their little building on the 25-foot lot, and then out it goes and turns and looks at the building and goes once around it like this, in showing the whole downtown live. I mean, you can see cars driving by. So it was done with those little helicopter things. Anyway, I know we brought up making the larger developments give us better visuals. And, we talked about it, but obviously I think we didn't do it. When I was talking to you, Barry, you said that we haven't changed anything yet, so it's not, I was talking to the planner, we haven't changed anything yet, so it's still not being required. And I think on some of these bigger developments, we're really cheating ourselves not doing that, not getting to see the real perspective. And I don't know how we change that without, I'd like to make a motion that we just make it happen, make it law like right now.
Gary?
Sorry to say you can't. As Arthur's can confirm, we can do that with rezonings, but with development permits, it would require an amendment to the information requirements in the zoning bylaw.
Okay, so rezonings, can we make that law for rezonings? Or have we?
The council has, I have to check on the information requirements under rezonings as well, whether or
And
not.
the development procedures
Yeah.
as well.
So to mandate it under all circumstances, no questions asked, is probably two bylaw amendments. One to the development procedures bylaw, one to the zoning bylaw.
But on rezonings, we can require it.
Well, and council has a lot more discretion as to how they deal with these items. If they want to say you don't want to deal with something until you see that, that's council's discretion. You
Could
don't
we-
have that discretion with development.
Could we bring up that email and just, it's a 30-second video?
No. I don't have my email.
You got it on your computer, Pat? But you know what I mean? I mean, I've talked about this before, and it's just, it tires me out when something so simple that would bring so much benefit to us is so hard, you know? And, you know, and then I see the smallest development in the whole town does it. And all the other ones don't. And, you know, like Pete, you were saying to me the other day, I won't be specific about the development. I remember Pete said to me the other day, oh my God, you see that one? Just towers over the neighbors. Well, we could have seen that if we had a, so, I mean,
Doug, then Patty?
Yeah, I did look at the video just before the meeting started, and it would be a handy tool, and it's not probably the kind of thing we'd want to use in every proposal. It's probably for rezonings as opposed to DPs. I don't know that it's a DP issue. But particularly where you're dealing with height, which is primarily the downtown area, I guess, and maybe some other commercial areas, to get a sense of them, or the new building compared to what's existing. It would be handy. So I will make a motion, actually, that staff be directed to bring back draft proposals for improved video presentations of proposed rezonings.
I'll second that.
And I'll just stop there. If there's a second, I'll just speak.
Yeah, I second that.
And I'm thinking that staff will tell us where it might be appropriate, where it's probably not needed, like a single-family home or something like that is obviously not, or something that's a little bit less potentially obtrusive. But we're dealing with now 6 stories, possibly 8 stories, and in some cases maybe even higher in the future. Things like this would be very handy tools, I think. And when you get drones involved as opposed to a full-on helicopter thing, it makes it the whole thing just much more doable.
And if I may add something to that, I think it should also speak to just renderings in 3D, not just video, but it should speak to whatever rendering that may be, whether it be video or, so it's not just specific to video. I've got Patty, Ted, and Sue.
Yeah, I was gonna add 3D renderings, meaningful 3D renderings, not from angles that no one's gonna actually see them from, or video. And I don't want, this shouldn't be complicated. Like, I think staff should be communicating right now, this is sort of the expectation. We may prescribe it down the road in terms of exactly what that expectation is, but all these developers, I'm expecting this tomorrow, like this type of communications tool tomorrow. I think there's a lot of rezonings that report, and I would like to add variances. If there's a DP or a DVP, I think all variances should be showing that was. I mean, obviously, if it's a 2-inch variance or something, but if you're going to ask for a variance on a DP, I'd expect it in that circumstance as well. And when it's a rezoning, it should be to, we got tripped up, for example, on the main, because when we did the rezoning for that, it was a sort of a combination 4- and 5-story building, completely different, and then the property was sold, new owner built out to the maximum 6 stories. So it can't just be on what the actual proposal is, because the land can be sold, it has to be kind of conceptualizing what the maximum could be. So it's, I mean, I know this makes it complicated, but someone could say, well, we're doing a 4-story building, but it's zoned for a 6-story building, and all of a sudden it gets sold, comes back, the main is a prime example of that, and all of a sudden it's a 6-story building. Even though that was allowable under the zoning, it wasn't what was in front of the council of the day. So I don't know how we overcome that, but it should be sort of like the maximum zoning is, so we actually get that real visual. But I don't think this is rocket science. I think this should be a quick turnaround, come back to council with a quick policy so that we actually start seeing applications come in with that. And even ones, like this isn't something that starts now, even ones that are in midstream right now should be coming back to this. They're communications tools, they're for council, they're for community.
Well said, thank you. And Ted?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about it is, you know, everybody has the technology to do it. And when they draw their plans, they're all drawing in 3D or they're using ArchiCAD, they can just snap it, it's 3D. I can do it, you know, and I've been drafting for a while, but I can 3D a building in an afternoon. I can cube up a building. But the realtors, if you're selling your house now, if you want to spend the extra $400, you can have a video of your house, and they'll fly around the house. So I mean, hammering out the fine details, like what Patty's saying about mass. If you're going for a rezone, this is what I'm asking to build. This is what I'm building. Well, it might be good to know that, like you say, so they sell the property and the next guy builds the big thing. Also, the icing on the cake is everybody can take their buildings and put them on their lots. We can put that on our website, and it's just what you've been talking about, Sue, which is 3D the downtown. We would have it digital before these buildings are here, so you could fly into the downtown and see all the future buildings. I mean, we could see, had we done that earlier, we could see all this stuff that's coming, you know, with the road bump outs and the bike lanes.
Yep.
So I'm happy that everybody's supportive of this, and it'll change the way we see and do things.
That's technology we should be using. Sue?
Thanks, that's exactly my point is, I can't remember when I put forward that we would 3D the OCP, it never really came back. I think 3Ding the OCP and our zoning that is expected to be in the new OCP is something that can be done through our GIS system, and it is not about, it's just about basically having the height and the mass of a building that is possible with the appropriate setbacks. When people are purchasing property, the amount of communication that it provides for people purchasing property, instead of coming back and saying, you know, you can't have that 6-story building there. When they purchase a property, they can just pop onto our OCP and say, oh, that land is zoned next to me for a 6-story building, or whatever the density that's allowed. So future density in an OCP, 3Ding that, and so that you can have it at angles. The technology is really simple nowadays, and integrating that would be a worthwhile project for a GIS, for an amazing GIS team.
Thank you. Gary, you have some marching orders?
Do you need a motion for that?
We have a motion for that.
Final
And a
minutes,
second.
yes, the modelling, the OCP, that's a massive project. That's not a simple project to do. Yes, it can be done. And Mayor Heinz and I, we are going to be modelling a sub-area plan. So you're going to see that sort of thinking in a much smaller geographic area. So I hear you, we're working on that too. We're not going to sitting back and somebody else doing that one. So
It's a good start.
Quest students are amazing in that.
that's
It's a data entry situation.
Royal Road. Royal Roads.
Railroads, yeah, it's a,
PhD student.
Okay.
a fellow, yeah.
So we have a motion on the floor to,
Yeah.
would you like to?
Call the question.
No, call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And Patty had an.
I just have a small correction on the minutes. There's a motion that doesn't say if it's carried or not. And I just want to make sure it's just above, it says amendment to C4. We take the vote and we say opposed, but we don't actually say it's carried or failed. So just add the, I think it's carried in there. It's above, it's on page 7 in the report. It says amendment to C4 just above that one. Thanks.
Thank you. So,
Move to terminate.
move to terminate. Moved by Penny, seconded by Ted, all in favor? Carried, thank you.